Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the RAC ICC webinar. Really pleased to have so many people joining for an update from us, which we know is long overdue. So thank you for your patience. I'm going to pass you over to Dr. Samir Al-Ansari, who's going to do an introduction for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Good morning, everybody. Great to see so many joining us. And as Alan said, it's a little bit overdue. So much has been happening in the last many months. But I guess from my end, it'll just be a quick introduction to welcome you all, and then I'll hand over to Alan. There's a lot to go through. And in this kind of continuing world of uncertainty, which seems to change for the worse by the day, I guess we're very, very lucky to be in what I consider to be the only bright spot on the global map these days. And we really are lucky to be in the UAE, and we should take advantage of all the advantages that the UAE offers. And it's not me saying it, the whole world seems to be coming to the UAE, to Dubai, to Ras Al Khaimah, and so on, to take advantage of our safe and secure environment, our growing economy, our banking system, legal system, all of the advantages that I guess we and you have known for many years, and I think the rest of the world is suddenly waking up to and realize that this is a great place to do business, structure business, and live, work, and play, as we've always said. So it's easy to frankly get depressed when you watch the news and see what's happening and read what's happening around the world. But at the same time, we really are the only bright spot in this troubled world. And for all of us, that's good news from a business perspective. Let's take advantage of it. We are constantly trying to evolve and to add products and services to serve you better, to cater for all the changes that are happening. So please feel free to talk to us, to suggest ideas, products, services, solutions, structures, all these things. As you know, we're always accessible, we're always open to explore. So let me leave you with that thought, and please do remember that we're always available to you if there's anything you want to discuss or ideas you want to explore with us. So with that, I hope you have a good session with us and a good day, and I hand back to Alan.
Thank you, Doctor. And I wanted to put up on screen the content of today's session and really explain why we couldn't do it in person. We would have loved to have met everybody and gone back to the format where we're hosting. But today's session really covers an awful lot of detail that needs looking at on a screen. And I'm not intending, and you'll be relieved that I'm not going to talk through every point that's on the screen. What I'd encourage you to do is refer back to the presentation. We'll obviously make the slides available so that you've got the links and the details that you need, so you can check up and research further into the detail that we're providing here. I want to make the point that nothing in the content today is RAC ICC specific until I hand over to Lara at the end of the session. She's going to give some RAC ICC updates. But everything I'm covering this morning are from the federal requirements that apply to all UAE companies, but nonetheless we thought would be helpful to share from a RAC ICC perspective. So we'll start for the guidance that's been issued by the central authorities for DNFBPs, corporate service providers. And I'm starting there because it's clear that the ministry holds very important the role that corporate service providers will have in protecting the UAE and the international obligations. And so very useful for you to see what they're highlighting as being the areas that as corporate service providers, they would want you to concentrate on. So I'm not going to go through the guidance in detail. You'll be pleased about that, but I've listed down some of the things it's talking about, how you can identify risks, what you can do to mitigate them, what your obligations for reporting are, confidentiality of data protection, the significance of those. And very importantly, there are definitions in the document of what you need to consider and also clarifying what doesn't need. You'll have heard a lot of talk in the last 12 months about the risk-based approach. I can assure you we've been applying a risk-based approach to RAC ICC for many years now. But I'm pleased to say the Ministry have given us some guidance on what a risk-based approach, an effective risk-based approach should look like. And we're doing more work to ensure that we've assessed the risk of the client. And actually, that's leading us in some instances to require less information than we had in the past, because we've been able to identify scenarios that are lower risk than we might have thought of. So there is value in doing the risk-based approach. It's not just more work, more research, more detail. It actually is a very useful process to go through to help ensure that the efforts that we're all putting in are targeted on the right areas, and not least of all leading to some more simplified uses of due diligence, as well as the enhanced due diligence monitoring. So please do look at what is an acceptable, useful, risk-based approach as detailed by the Ministry, because I really think it will help you and your organisations to become more effective. There are the guidance that for you as firms that talk about how you should be set up, what your governance should be, the importance of compliance officers. And I know that this is an area that has exponential growth, really, the requirement for compliance officers across the UAE, but the importance also of training for all of your staff, the importance of independent reviews, not just of your clients, but actually independent reviews of your own operations, how you operate. As senior managers, you'll be very interested to look at what your responsibilities are, because with those responsibilities obviously come accountability. And understandably, we quite often hear from people saying, oh, but we're only a small organization, you know, why would all these rules apply to us? And again, in the details, in the guidance, there's information about what is proportionate for you as a smaller organization. The Ministry has re-emphasized the importance of record keeping, and of course, particularly in this current environment, making sure that we're complying with the requirements of consideration of the risk of sanctioned activities. So all of that is in there, in that document. We've put a link in there for you, and please, I'd encourage you to look at it in more details. That's what I've talked about up to now, is you as a corporate service provider, but we're now going to talk about your clients and your clients that have DNFBP activities, because the Ministry has increased its attention and focus on that. And many of you will recently have received a communication from us where we've been asking you to clarify whether any of your clients are conducting these activities, because the Ministry want to identify what DNFBPs have registered in the UAE. So this is not just a RAC ICC exercise. But we wanted to make sure before we pass that information over that we'd validated it. So that's why we've been in contact with you. But please consider that any of your clients operating in these activities need a separate risk assessment above and beyond normal activity. They're considered to be higher risk of AML CFT, and you do have increased obligations with those clients. And then not least of all, of course, the companies that you're using that are then, or that you're offering, that are then providing corporate services and trust to other companies all around the world. Now, all DNFBPs need to be registered for GoAML. We've explained to the Ministry that as registered agents, you are already registered for GoAML. What we don't know yet is whether they're going to come and say, actually, all of the underlying clients that are conducting those activities need to be registered for GoAML. And that may well be part of the communication that comes out as we continue working with them. But very clear that there's a focus on DNFBPs, so that you need to consider your own client portfolio. Are they DNFBPs? And have we covered off the risks associated with them in satisfaction with the Ministry requirements? Of course, you do it through a risk-based approach. Very important to double check back on that. And also important to realize that just because the client is conducting those activities outside of the UAE, it doesn't mean that there's no impact on the UAE, because obviously there's reputational impact in the fact that the company is registered in the UAE and you are looking after that company. So important that the risks associated with DNFBPs are mitigated. I hope that's a helpful introduction to that subject for you, but please do refer to the notes. Many of you won't meet your clients face to face. Obviously, I know a lot of you do, but one of the highlighted risks in the FATF guidelines are what to do with clients that you don't meet face to face. And so taking that into account, we've introduced an electronic KYC verification service, which at least if you're not meeting the client face to face, you know that the documentation they've provided has gone through an electronic check and that it is a real person and that the document matches the person that's purporting to send the information through to you. I'm not planning to do a full demonstration of the system, but we've got guidance on it. We really would encourage you to use it. Have a look back at these slides later, see how it would fit into your organization, because by providing us with this digitally verified documentation, I believe that goes some way to mitigating the risk of not dealing with clients face to face. And actually, even if the client is in front of you, you can still on the app, on their phones, provide this verified information. I promise you I won't go into the details of the system, but I just wanted to make sure you were aware that this is there to help, and obviously useful that we're keeping up to date with modern technologies that help us all mitigate our risks. The next section is probably the most important of the topics we're going to cover today. And again, I promise you, I'm not going to go into too much detail now, but across the UAE, every company is now required to meet the requirements of the cabinet resolution. And the risks for doing it, you can see there, are fines up to 100,000 dirhams. So I can't emphasize enough the significance of looking at it. And what we've put into this presentation, although again, I'm not going to go into them all in detail, are the areas that are covered. So you won't be surprised that it is maintaining a beneficial ownership register, but very significantly making sure that's up to date. And you'll see that if you have the beneficial ownership register, but you don't notify us of any changes within 15 days, we will immediately, and for the first time, issue a written warning. And you'll already been receiving these warnings if you've fallen foul of that legislation. We've set the system up for beneficial ownership to be able to issue you with these first-time warnings. The problem when you do it again for a second time is that there's going to be an automatic 10,000 dirham fine applied. And then if you do it the third time, a 20,000 dirham fine applied and suspension of the company for at least 1 month, and certainly until situations are rectified. So this is very significant, doesn't only apply to RAC ICC, and I would ask you to make sure your communication with your clients ensures that they're aware that their need to keep you up to date, so that you can keep us up to date, so that you don't fall foul of these fines. Now, when you go through the slides, you'll notice that the numbering's out of order, and that's because I've tried to put the details together in topic areas so that you can follow through possibly more logically than they follow through in the legislation for understandable reasons. But I wanted to bring all of the beneficial ownership points together. So please do pay attention to your obligation. Of course, you can't set up a RAC ICC company without the UBO register, but the significance of then making sure it's kept up to date. And this is an area where I am concerned that we may not have the compliance rates at the level that we feel would be acceptable, because I do believe there are probably nominee company arrangements that haven't yet been declared to us. Now, as soon as the cabinet resolution came out, we set up the systems to enable you to file guidance on nominee declarations. And we're mentioning record keeping there, but the link here actually should be to the nominee maintenance. And I want to make sure that we have all of the information on the nominee details filed appropriately. Because you'll see there, again, if you haven't notified us, there's a written warning. And then if there are repeat offences, then the fines become extremely significant. So please do pay attention to nominee declarations. And then there's shareholder registers, and you're all aware of the shareholder requirements. And again, it's all about making sure that you keep a register, we're aware of who the shareholders are. And of course, a shareholder change at RAC ICC doesn't become effective until it's been registered. So we've got that pretty well taken care of. But again, just making sure records are kept up to date. Section 10 in there, you need to look into the articles of the underlying Cabinet Resolution 58 to see what it's really referring to. I believe that's referring to bearer shares, so isn't relevant. But nonetheless, we kept it all in there so that you could see the significance of ensuring the information is held and maintained. And then there's record keeping, and you'll have seen now that we are checking that you are have the systems in place to keep the appropriate records, because failure to keep those records again carries very significant fines. And for that very reason, we set up specific record keeping guidelines. And we quite often get the comments through that RAC ICC doesn't require financial accounts and therefore you don't necessarily hold the information. But we wanted to clarify in here that there is a federal requirement that even though you don't need to file accounts with us, there is a federal requirement that means that you have to always know the financial status of the company and then have records of what's been received, and also, of course, the balance sheet of the company. And I think what's important to note is that you might say, well, we as the registered agent won't keep that. But when the ministry are conducting an investigation into a company and request that information, and then we have to go back and say, oh, you know, that information isn't held, they're looking at it and saying, well, why isn't it? Because it is an obligation under the international guidelines for those records to be kept. So even if you're not keeping them, you need to know that you've got access to them. And then that's a conversation you need to have you know, with your client to make sure that you're not embarrassed when we come asking for information that you should have that's not there. So please do pay attention to the record keeping guidelines. And very importantly, a focus on keeping the records for 5 years. And that's something that FATF are very keen to ensure. So we must make sure we've got the right information, not just while the client is there on your books, but afterwards also. I promise you I'm not going to go through all of these questions on IT security. I wouldn't even know the answers to some of them myself, I can assure you. But I just want to emphasize the importance of making sure you're able to keep your client records safe and secure. And this list of questions, and it goes over 2 pages, has been provided to us by the authorities to say these are the sorts of things you really need to have at least considered. I'm not saying that everything would be appropriate for every company, but have you really given good consideration to the IT security of your systems, of your clients? And please do take the time to read through these. Obviously talk to your IT suppliers or your IT staff and just see whether there are any recommendations that come off the back of this that would be sensible for you to implement. And then moving on to the next substance, next topic of economic substance. And again, I appreciate that this isn't anything new to you. In fact, this is exactly the same slide that we presented last time, other than the fact that the dates have been updated. But you can see we're heading towards the 30th September deadline here. And so there is still work that needs to be done in relation to economic substance to make sure that you're meeting the obligations. And the training on the Ministry of Finance website is very good. So if you do need to understand more about the economic substance, there's a very good video training available to you. The test at the end of the training is extremely difficult. And if you really want a challenge in your life, I challenge you to take that test and see how well you do even after you've done the training. But please do pay attention to economic substance. It hasn't gone away. It isn't going away. It's an ongoing commitment, an ongoing obligation that we all have. And so we've highlighted some common issues that we've been seeing with economic substance. And not least of all, I would say one area that's wasting your time and wasting ours. We're getting a lot of economic substance notifications filed when it's not necessary. There's no relevant activity, and so there is no obligation to file. So I would urge you, please don't charge your clients making filings that don't need to be filed. Please don't spend time making filings that don't need to be filed. We've got to then check all of those filings, and it's obviously we would much rather not see the notifications filed. But having said that, I also want to encourage to make sure all of the filings that do need to be made have been made. People will have made a filing that says it was a relevant activity, change their mind and say, oh, it's no longer a relevant activity. Unfortunately, we can't take that at face value. We need supporting evidence to, if you are making a change in the filing, be prepared to provide us with the supporting evidence. And again, if you are stating that there's no income associated with the activity, we need to see evidence of it. So one of the things that we've not been having is the evidence that's been enabling us to clear your filings through quickly. And that means we have to then come back to you for more information, which is then causing you more work. A very minor point, but there's a button on the system that's very easy to hit, and people are hitting that button, making filings that didn't need to be filed, and it can cause this difficulty. And then also, please avoid filing in advance, because if you file in advance and then the situation changes, you've got to remember to make an updated filing. Otherwise, you'll be in breach for making a false filing. So please just consider the timings on economic substance as well. The team is really, doing everything we can to help, explain economic substance in more detail, but don't hesitate to go as the first point of reference to the ministry information, which is very well laid out. One of the things the ministry asks us is, how do we know your companies are being compliant? How do we know they're compliant? So the significance of us on renewal asking you to verify certain details is critical to us, and we need to rely on this information, but we also need to know the information's accurate. And we've all filled forms out where we just tick the answer to get on to the next part of the form. But please do take these declarations seriously, not least of all because it's an offence to provide false information on these declarations. And it really does help us reassure the ministry that the companies within RAC ICC do take all the matters about maintaining, keeping information up to date, maintaining records, dealing with conflicts of interest. It's all taken very seriously, and we're providing credible answers back. If you just go through and tell us what you think we want to hear, that's not going to help with the credibility of the register. So thank you for paying attention to that. As part of that, we're under obligations to inspect. And in the past, when we've been doing inspections, we've been inspecting, I would say, the agent, and we've been inspecting that the agent has policies, procedures, etc. in place. our focus is going to switch much more to the underlying companies. We're needing to inspect the records of RAC ICC companies on a risk-based approach. This isn't something we're doing just because we feel it's a good idea. It's something we're actually obliged to do by the ministry. And actually, every zone is obliged to run an inspection regime on every company across the UAE. So it isn't only us that you're going to be seeing this from. We will be as helpful as we can in providing you as much notice so that you can prepare. We want you to pass the inspection. We want you to have the information. We want you to be able to easily provide the evidence to us. But we're going to be looking at UBO. We're going to be looking at shareholder nominee arrangements. We're going to be looking at the director records and also ESR filing. So expect much more from us in inspections going forwards. And the ministry is going to be putting us under pressure to make sure we're demonstrating an effective inspection regime. That's the last bit of the FATF. And so you'll be pleased to know that we're drawing to an end on what I wanted to go through. And I appreciate that's a lot of information to take on. This last slide from me is not in relation to FATF, but it is another compliance requirement, and it's specifically relating to the ownership of UK property by RAC ICC companies, or of course any companies. So, you know, it may well be that there are other UAE companies that are owning property in the UK. And if you're not aware of the of this legislation, just look at the penalty of £2,500 a day or a prison sentence to give you some idea that you should be taking this seriously. So again, I'm not going to talk through in detail. You've got other reference sources on this information, and we've put a link to the UK government website on this, where it's very well explained what you need to do. So there's nothing wrong in a RAC ICC holding a UK company, and of course we'd encourage it. It's definitely something that is a feature of what a RAC ICC company can be used for, and actually may be more appropriate for you to hold them through a RAC ICC company going forward. But just don't forget the obligation to make sure that is maintained. And on that note, you'll be pleased that that's all you're going to hear from me today, and I'll pass you over to Lara. So thank you. And then obviously, Lara, let me know when you want to move on to slides. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Alan. Good morning, everyone. So from my side, I just want to give you some positive updates on a few of our products and services that we're offering, and they have become very popular. Specifically, I'm talking about foundations. So foundations in the UAE have been rapidly becoming very popular and a great option for regional structuring, wealth structuring, and intergenerational legacy planning. As you may know, like family businesses are the mainstay of the GCC economy and account for around 75% of the private sector, and also around 50% of the GDP in the region comes from family businesses, and therefore we cannot ignore the fact that there is a need for succession planning tool to guarantee business continuities for such families. And the UAE has 3 registries offering foundations, which is, you know, a very great tool for succession planning because it has all the features of a trust, yet it's a legal entity which was more recognized in the region. We've seen that the numbers of foundations have been growing very fast. We've introduced foundations in early 2020, and you can see from the snapshot here that the numbers have picked really fast. So the foundations, I've also took some stats from the registry to give you just an idea about who's using the foundation. So we've got over 52 nationalities from the founders using the RAC ICC foundations. It is also very popular because it's being used by not just non-Muslims, but it's also an option for Muslims where they can also implement Sharia laws in the charters and the bylaws of the foundation. And for they use foundations mainly for many reasons, but the most declared objectives, of course, is for intergenerational legacy planning and consolidation of assets and wealth preservation, and some of them would use it for philanthropic purposes. So I encourage you, everybody, to, if you haven't started already using foundations or offering foundations to your private clients, this is a great option, and it has become a really a very good succession planning tool for families in the region. So this is when it comes to foundations. The next slide, please, Alan. I also want to highlight a few of the, I would say, comparison between global product and premium product, because we've introduced global product earlier this year, and some of you got confused about the differences between the two products. So it's just for me to highlight the differences. Now, the global product, just to remind you, is a free zone company licensed from our sister organization, RAKES. We say it's a mid-shore free zone setup because it has all the benefits of the free zone, yet it has some of the features of the offshore, in the sense that it requires a registered agent to apply or to submit the application for the setup of the free zone, and not just for the setup, it's also for the amendments, renewals, and the deregistration of the company. This is extremely beneficial for our registered agents because it will allow them to, to the post-incorporation services that needs to be done through them. So the client basically cannot go directly to the free zone to do any changes post-incorporation. The premium product, it's a corporate structure. So it's two companies registered through RAK ICC, which basically is a holding company with RAK ICC and a subsidiary with RAKES. And of course, you can benefit from this corporate structure. A holding company has all the RAK ICC or the common law features on the holding level. It can be used for holding purposes and holding shares in other companies and for international business. And the free zone or the subsidiary will give you access to the UAE market. It's the operational company. You can apply for visas, and of course, you'll have office facilities at the free zone level. In terms of the legal entity, it's for the global product, you can have a new registration as a free zone entity or LLC or a branch. It allows also redomiciliation from other jurisdictions through the global product. If you also have a RAK ICC company, you can also convert it to a global product. When it comes to premium product, it's just a new registration. License type, there are more options for global product that includes the media, e-commerce, and education. For premium product, it's commercial services and general trading. Office facilities, again, there are options for warehouses and land development for global product. Corporate directors are permitted in the global product, and as mentioned earlier, there is the option for migration from other jurisdictions to a global product. In terms of the packages, I've also set the packages and the fees just to bear in mind that for the premium product, this package includes two companies, so the registration of the RAK ICC company and the license from RAKES. Whereas the global product is just, the one company registered with a free zone. And that's it from my side. I'll hand over back to Alan. I believe we have some questions from the audience.
Great, Lara. Yes, thank you very much. And yes, there are a couple of questions that we'll just pick up on. One was about if the company isn't handling the company account. So both of the questions relate to record keeping. And I do think I covered that in the presentation, and as much as we were saying, if you're not handling company accounts, just make sure you've got an agreement in place whereby you can access the information should it be required. Because without that, it will be embarrassing when you can't. Now, I appreciate that companies already liquidated or struck off for more than 5 years. No, you don't need to keep those records because the requirement is to keep the period for 5 years. But a company that was recently liquidated or struck off, yes, you should be maintaining those records. Now, I know that might be difficult if you haven't got them, but please do adjust your policies and procedures to make sure that going forwards, you're going to be able to comply with these requirements. So thank you all very much for attending. I hope you found that useful. It wouldn't surprise me at all if it's been thought-provoking and given you some more questions. That please don't hesitate to email through to us. We'll do our best to answer those. Sorry, another question's come through, Lara, on foundations and bank accounts. And so, yes, we'll go back to you with the details of which banks are opening accounts for RKCC Foundation.
Yes, just to add on this, Alan. So, of course, for foundations, the local banks are started to become familiar with foundations, but there are also some other options with private banks. So we'll share with you some of the options that are available to open accounts for foundations.
Yeah, great. No, that's great. And we do have the banking guide as well that we keep regularly updated because we know that this is an area that you are interested in. So please keep in touch with us on the banking requirements. We'll share the guide with you. Anything else to sum up, Dr. Smith?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to something that I said earlier on, which is our desire to continue to explore new products and services. And there's no doubt that you know, the world is rapidly moving in the direction of digital assets and virtual assets and many activities that fall under that broad sector. And you know, we encourage you to come and talk to us about those activities and also what you're seeing in other jurisdictions, because you know, we want to be able to do more in that space. We obviously have to be careful as to what we take on and what we don't, and what's regulated and what isn't. But definitely we have an open mind to exploring more activities in that space. So please come and talk to us.
Thank you. And we've had a couple more questions in one asking about the latest utility information from directors, shareholders on renewal. Again, this comes down to risk-based approach. So there may be some directors that we require information for and others that we won't. But I can assure you we're looking at and making sure that the risk-based approach doesn't ask for information that is going to be inconvenience for no good reason. We've also been asked whether the records need to be maintained physically and digitally, and digital's fine. But then that goes back to my IT security question or point being raised, that if you are going to be relying on digital records, then please ensure that you have the right security safety in place. In terms of the requirement to conduct an independent compliance audit, again, look at the guidance that we put in on there from the ministry, because they cover that as a specific topic. And then we're being asked in respect to ESR, whether the reporting period relates to the renewal date or the financial end. And that depends on the company. For most RAC-ICC companies, it's the renewal date, because the companies haven't set a specific financial year end. But if the company does set a specific financial year end, then it can use that as the date. So by default, RAC-ICC companies are on renewal, but if the company chooses to set a financial year end, you can use that going forwards. And those are all the questions. So on that, we'll just once again pass on our thanks and very much appreciate continuing working with you. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.